Today I want to take a look at how to grant your full support team Site Collection Admin rights. Here we are looking at SharePoint Admin Center, and to access this console you need to have SharePoint Admin Tenant role permissions. Now, zooming out for a moment and thinking about what all the permissions are and when we would use them, I think there's a worthwhile question. If you don't have tenant level admin, that you're not a SharePoint admin for the full tenant, is there a different permission level to help support sites? Something more than being a site owner, something more than being granted one site at a time. Do you have a level 2 support team, a middle tier support team? They might not need SharePoint Admin Center. It might be too many permissions, but maybe they need Site Collection Admin and they need it for all of the sites you're supporting as a way of effectively giving users access. Another thing to note is Site Collection Admin, you get access to everything. There's no need to grant permissions to child sites, document libraries, child lists, or anything one-off. When you have SCA, you get to see all content all the time. Very practical for support teams. But maybe you don't want your support team in the admin center, changing settings, modifying the tenant overall. So what do? If we want to grant Site Collection Admin for everything in the tenant, we don't have web application policy. This is not on-prem. You cannot grant a web application policy. So what we want to do is grant Site Collection Admin for all of the site collections we have. And there's a couple ways of going about that to loop all the site collections we have and grant SCA for each one. Now, taking a look at the permissions level, here we can look at the overall permissions in SharePoint Online. At the top of the pyramid, we have Tenant Admin, which is what I mentioned, gives you full access to all of the settings and all the sites. It's what we were just looking at a moment ago. Site Collection Admin is what we're talking about for a support team. And this is something that allows you to get everything on the site settings menu, right? It allows you to grant and view permissions to everything. It's a very high level of permission, but it's for one site collection URL. And then site owner is a lesser permission level. It allows you to modify contents, essentially full control. You can grant permissions here, and you do get some of the site settings, but it's not going to cover the site collection settings in all cases. If you're owner of the root, then yes, but it's a little bit more limited on the site settings. And you do have the potential with this of essentially locking yourselves out. You could remove yourself. With SCA, then it cascades all the way down the tree. So you have this full tree inheritance aspect going on where if you're Site Collection Admin at the root level, then you've got all rights to all content beneath, whether it's a list, library, or a child site. So SCA, very practical for support teams. And maybe you want something different than tenant admin. That could be too many permissions. So let's take a look at how we would apply SCA to the full tenant by using PowerShell. And here, looking at Azure Active Directory or Intra, we do have a group already created. This group is called SPO Support Team. It is a cloud security group with a GUID number, and it currently has one owner and one member. We're going to copy down that GUID number and bring it into our PowerShell code. And one of the things to know about working with groups in Azure AD and then granting them in PowerShell PnP is it loves the GUID number. If you can get the object ID GUID number, there's a lot that can happen with that. Membership assigned manually here in the browser. We've got one user. You can always click add to add someone else. We'll go with the one member for now. So here we are in PowerShell taking a look at some template code. What our tenant admin URL is, essentially this is our same thing as our admin center. And then what's our support group GUID going to be? And the goal is to loop all sites in the tenant and grant them SCA. Here we'll go ahead and template out a framing for the code, and this is going to have log transcript, closing the log with the duration, hours, minutes, seconds, how long did it take for the process to run, and then invoking a main function which does the heavy lifting. We are bringing in PowerShell PnP or pnp.powershell. So making sure we have our module, good stuff, going into the main, and this is where it gets interesting. So we want to connect to SharePoint Online, the tenant admin URL, Use web login, we're going to change that to interactive, and we're going to say use interactive to prompt for credentials with support for MFA. And that would be multi-factor authentication. So by using interactive, we get MFA support. It is one of the newer ways of authenticating. In the past, we had use web login. You might need that for compatibility. It depends, I guess, if you're doing Duo or Microsoft Authenticator, any custom federated identity services. There might be ways that you would need to use web login, or it's just what you have available because you're running an older PowerShell version. But for most people, Dash Interactive, that's where we're going to go. We want to get all the sites in the tenant. Get PnP tenant site will accomplish that. Then we want to loop through each site collection and grant SCA to the support team. Very cool. So here we are doing our loop. Yes, we have set PnP tenant site, owners, and we can bring in the support team right there. Now the support team is expressed as a GUID. There's one thing we want to check about that. If we navigate over to our tenant and open up the site settings permission page, we can come in and we can find the Site Collection Admin pop-up window. Good stuff. Cool. If I take the GUID number of this Azure AD security group, which has never been used here, and I paste it in, it's going to resolve out to SPO support team. That's pretty good stuff. Give it the GUID number and it made sense of it. If we use F12 to inspect that name resolution object, we're going to learn a little bit more about what happened. So it took the GUID number right here, underlined in red, and it gave it a prefix, a claims prefix, C:0 T.C pipe tenant pipe. Kind of interesting. Like, that's our claims format for the group itself. And in something like this, I might just say Azure AD support group from, and we're going to copy paste this URL just as a way of making it easy to get to. And this really isn't about the function of the script, but I think it's a good habit. In fact, there's several things in here for the script that are not needed that are all good habits. Let's take a look at those briefly. You've got comments. You've got a name of the script that matches the purpose. You have a log file with timestamps. The log files are going to a subfolder named log. I mean, all of these are good ideas. Name the file with something meaningful. Put comments frequently. Put hyperlinks to any references you used in creating your code. Open up a log file. Put it in a subfolder. Name it after the runtime. Name it after the script itself. Go ahead and close things up with how long did it take to run? Calculate the hours, minutes, seconds. This doesn't happen in a normal transcript. By default, a transcript shows you the start timestamp and it shows you the ending timestamp. It doesn't give you anything about duration. You have to go calculate that. Why would we calculate duration by hand? We can go ahead and put that in here. And then have a main function. So we're getting named functions for actions. Now, why would you want a named function for your actions, for your logic, for your execution? Well, there's a few reasons. One, you get the breadcrumbs here in VS Code. It'll tell you where you're navigating. You can use that to switch in and out. When an exception, an error occurs, it'll tell you where it happened. It was in the main function. And it really just gives you a starting point that all of this is overhead and kind of ignore it, really, for most purposes. It's ignore. It's safe to skip over, right? There's nothing interesting happening here. This is where we're going to get into the logic, the specifics. This is really why we want a name function. And naming that function main is where we're going to start. We can also make more functions, right? This gives us a growth pattern, a growth mindset, where we know our script only has main today, but I don't know. I mean, in the future, it might need more. It's an easy pattern to extend. So now that we have our pattern established, we're going to set the owners. We're looping through, granting SCA to. That's going to hit the transcript. We got the site itself. We got the URL coming through. Pretty good stuff. This is really what we need to execute. We'll go ahead and give it a spin. We do get a brief pop-up window for authentication. That went through, gave it the credentials for login. Here it is working through all the sites in the tenant. And it's really easy stuff. We have the claims pattern with the claims prefix, right? So this is claims authentication prefix. And then we have the GUID number for the Azure AD group. I know it's intra, the marketing people, but the Azure AD group has the GUID number, and it's going to loop through and it's going to grant this for every single thing in the tenant. That's pretty cool. So now that we've done this, we've implemented the pyramid of permissions. And referencing back to the pyramid, tenant admin might be too much, right? Too many rights. We don't want our level 2 support team. We don't want our general support team to be in there playing with user profiles, with OneDrive, external sharing, storage, various trust settings, the app catalog for the tenant, deploying code. We don't want them in there at the tenant level, but we do want them in all the site collections to help users, right? To work any support tickets, to modify permissions. All those things are okay. So in this case, I mean, if you have, a support team and they're working the help desk ticket queue and they need so if you have a support team and they're working the help desk ticket queue, I mean, they might come in and say, okay, great. I have all the access I need to support end users. So we can open up the ticket queue, kind of work things from top to bottom, go through the list, reach out to people, be helpful, go ahead and resolve tickets for so many different users, right? I mean, who knows, right? There could be all different support cases, and I can get into marketing sites, accounting sites, manufacturing sites, whatever we need to support people. But we're staying away, from the root level, from the tenant level. There's certain settings in here that are more administrative. These are organization-wide. There can be some heavy decisions here, things we need to think about and coordinate more. So maybe instead of granting tenant admin for your level 2, level 3 even support staff, maybe site collection admin is what we need for our support staff. And using the PowerShell code shown in this video, we can grant SCA for everyone in our support group. And more importantly, we can easily manage it. As the membership changes, you can go back to Azure AD, update the list of members here, and go ahead and add more to your support team. You don't need to go back and reconfigure the sites. You add the members one time and it cascades across the full tenant. Because our grant was not a list of human names. Our grant was a group. And by using a group, we now have the flexibility to both add and remove people. Transfer departments, leave the company, new hire, no problem. All of those things can be handled by adjusting the membership of the group. So again, it gives us a lot of flexibility for new hires, maybe transfers to across the company, right? It could be even people that have left the company. There's a lot of scenarios of adding and removing membership to this group, and it gives us an easy control point to provide access to all site collections. Thanks for watching.